Second reading today comes from Luke 6, and we continue. We just finished the beginning of Jesus' Sermon on the Plain last week, the blessings and the woes, and we pick it up right from where we left off in Luke 6, 27 through 38. I invite you to listen now for God's word. But I say to you that listen, love your enemies and do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies. Do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Have you ever heard someone claim that religion is the opiate of the masses? Karl Marx, famously opposed to religion and especially to Christianity, thought that faith was no more than a drug meant to bring comfort to the weak-minded and the weak-willed. Maybe for some, faith is a simple answer for life's difficult questions. But if you want to convince me that faith is merely a drug that we take in order to make life easier, one that relieves us from having to wrestle with any of the realities of this world, then you're going to run into a problem whenever Jesus opens his mouth. Anyone who has ever really listened to Jesus preach knows that his way of life is not about comfort. He expects much of his disciples, while promising almost nothing that they ask of him. His words are not spiritual painkillers. They're much more like a surgeon's scalpel, sharp truths that cut in order to heal. Nothing about this sermon in Luke 6 is comfortable or easy, and those who try to follow Jesus as Lord will quickly learn that it can only be done with our eyes open, fully awake, and alert. The blessings and the woes that began the Sermon on the Plain gave us the first glimpse of how radical and countercultural Jesus' gospel is. In those verses, we learned that our value systems, our worldly expectations, tend to be 100% backwards from the way God actually works. What we think of as misfortune can instead be blessing, while the good fortune that we usually seek often actually separates us from God. Today, as Jesus continues preaching, he turns to the practical behaviors that we need to learn in order to live in this upside-down world. The starting point is to unlearn a rule that we almost all take for granted, the law of reciprocity, that we should give back what we get in this life. We should balance out the universe by treating other people the way they treat us. Do unto others whatever they do unto you. People that are friendly and considerate towards me, I'll do the same towards them. But that person who is insensitive to my concerns, well, I will ignore hers too. That guy who is routinely dishonest with me, I won't bother being truthful with him. It's a simple equation that we come up with here, tit for tat, and it easily makes sense to us. And even more, we seem to like the inherent fairness of doing unto others whatever they have done to us. Jesus acknowledges our natural inclination here, but he says, honestly, that is a very low bar. Even sinners love the people who love them. Even sinners lend money to the people who are going to pay it back to them. There's nothing special about being willing to play fair. Jesus wants more from us. His challenge to those who listen, who call ourselves his disciples, is to love our enemies, to do good for those who hate us, to bless those who curse us, to pray for those who abuse us, to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I've been watching the Netflix series Cobra Kai the past couple of weeks. It's great. It's based on the characters from the classic Karate Kid films in the 80s, Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence. And in high school, these guys fought over the same girl, and they became martial arts rivals. Now here they are in the present day, all grown up and decidedly middle-aged, and still fighting with each other, still feuding. 35 years later, they've never gotten over their rivalry. And the series presents this really well, I think, because neither of them is a bad guy, per se, but they both think the other one is. They constantly antagonize each other, and they see each other as the problem. All I'm ever doing is responding to what he did. I'm just defending myself. He is the aggressor. And because of this, because Johnny and Daniel each see themselves as the victim, the karate dojos that they have founded end up feuding with each other as well. The students go to school together, and they pick fights with each other on their sensei's behalf. They all think their job is to end the legacy of the other teacher. And the distrust and the animosity get passed down, handed on from one generation to the next. I've been fascinated by this portrayal because it is so real. This is how our rivalries persist. This is why we become enemies, the law of reciprocity in action. You just keep responding to what the other party did. You keep telling yourself, I'll stop when they do. I'll let it go as soon as they do. I'm a good person. I'm not to blame here. But as long as they keep doing what they're doing, I'm going to keep fighting back. I have to. I have to defend myself. I'm justified in this. And meanwhile, the person on the other side, who is very likely a decent, reasonable human being just like you, is thinking the exact same thing. Is thinking that they have to keep fighting back. They have to keep meeting you tit for tat. They can't let go because you haven't let go. Thus, the cycle never ends. It keeps getting passed on and spread around as you draw your allies closer together. You vilify the other, and you insulate yourselves from any possibility of understanding or de-escalation or peace. This is why, in place of the law of reciprocity, Jesus teaches us the golden rule. Don't just give back whatever the world has given to you. Don't just react to everything in kind. Take the first step toward healing. Be the one who initiates goodness. Give to others not what they give to you, but what you wish they would. Give your enemy love instead of hatred. Because if we persist as enemies, we're just going to keep on going and going back and forth until one or both of us is destroyed. That is the only inevitable outcome. But Jesus says, love your enemies. Of course, that's easier said than done. Well, let's start by considering who our enemies are. Those who we feel threatened by. Those who detract from our happiness or success. Those who are opposed to our interests. Such enemies are often found at work or at school, or in our close social spheres, sometimes even in our church. These people might challenge our ideas. They might say unkind things about us. They might take from us something that's valuable to us. They might fail to fulfill their responsibilities toward us as we see it. Our frustrations, our misunderstandings, our unmet expectations all lead us toward enmity with others. They might be people who are clearly out to get us, who have always stood against us, or they might be people who were once very close to us. Often a spouse or a former spouse, a parent or a son or a daughter becomes our enemy when something happens that disrupts, that damages the relationship. Remember, our enemies don't have to be bad people. Indeed, they usually aren't. They're just people like us who see the world from a different point of view, and to them, we are the problem just as much as they are to us. Who are your enemies? Next comes the hard part. How will you love them? What can you do to actively seek their good? See, Jesus wants to train his disciples in this new way of thinking. It's not just a matter of having a positive attitude. I mean, love isn't just something that happens on the intellectual level. The word Jesus uses for love, agapeo, is almost unique to the New Testament. It's a Greek word, and there are plenty of Greek words for love. There are plenty of words that the Greeks use to describe romance or faithfulness or affection, but Jesus doesn't use any of those words. He says agape when he talks about love. And that is a kind of love that is a consistent act of the will, something that we choose and something that we stick to. It's the kind of love that God has for the world. It's not a warm, fuzzy feeling toward us because we're so wonderful, but it's a love that enacts salvation for us despite the fact that we've done nothing to deserve it. Agape love is what God has shown us and wants us to show each other. It is something that must be expressed through our behaviors. So to do that, Jesus instructs us to do good, to bless, and to pray. Do good to those who hate you. When you think of a way that you can do good for someone who has hurt you, don't sit around waiting. Do it. David Cho Yonggi, pastor of the South Korean megachurch that's considered the world's largest congregation. At one time they had over 800,000 members. He used to tell his parishioners that they were not allowed to share the gospel with another person until they had performed 3 acts of service for them. Until they had done 3 kindnesses for that person. They couldn't talk about Jesus with them. This was both to cultivate reciprocity in that other person and an attitude of love in the evangelist. The pastor knew that once you start serving someone, your feelings of affection for them begin to grow. You care more for them because of your heart that you've already invested in them. And your devotion to that person and your relationship will become a much more effective witness. Any marriage counselor will tell you the same thing, that when your feelings toward your spouse wane or fade, as they always will over time, you cannot wait for the feelings to come back on their own to motivate the kind of behavior toward them that they would like to receive from you. You have to start with actions. You have to do those loving things whether you feel like it or not. Because if you continue to wait for love to come back to your heart before your actions do, it won't happen. You will almost certainly continue to drift farther and farther apart. When you start with the actions, the feelings will follow. When you love your enemy, you do what benefits him or her, not because you feel like it, but because you are trying to find it in your own troubled heart to love that person for Jesus' sake. Next, you bless those who curse you. When you think about the person who is slandering you, who is telling lies about you, who is saying unkind things behind your back, it is so easily to want to turn around and curse them too. Instead, Jesus wants you to speak well of your enemies, wants you to use your words to build them up rather than tear them down, and do it in front of others. I keep thinking back to a moment in the 2016 presidential race between Trump and Clinton. And amid two very negative campaigns, I think we can all agree that they did not like each other. They did not speak well of each other. At the end of a town hall debate, one brilliant questioner asked each of them to say something positive about the other one. And you could see on their faces it made them so uncomfortable. It was so unexpected. This was not a situation that they were ready for. But they both did it. Now, if Donald and Hillary could bless each other in front of all of us, surely you can bless your enemies. Why? Because it's guaranteed to end the strife between you? No. But because as you do so, you will find it more in your heart to love them. Third, you pray for those who persecute you. When you're praying, I know you're probably praying for your friends, your family, your church, your country. Maybe you're praying for your pastor. That'd be wonderful. What if you began to pray and intercede for your enemies, for the people who've done you wrong? What if you asked God to be good to them, to help them, to care for them? Ask God to heal the hurts in their lives that are sometimes, part of the motivation for the hurt that they have done to you. Ask God to bless them. Ask God to forgive them. Ask God to help them prosper. Why? To kill them with kindness? No. In order to begin to find it in your own heart to love them. I hope you'll forgive me for a second Cobra Kai reference in the same sermon. But there was a scene that I thought absolutely nailed it, where after a tragic accident occurs, Johnny is talking to an old friend who has become a pastor, and he's lamenting how awful this situation is, how unfair it is, and he had done the right thing. Why did this happen? Why didn't it all work out for the good? And the pastor, I was so thankful, did not give that pat, easy answer that poorly written religious characters on TV often do. It must be God's will. Yeah, I'm sure God has a reason, we don't see it yet. No, instead he said, Johnny, we don't do the right thing because it always brings the right result. We do the right thing because it is the right thing to do. Those who follow Jesus' call to love their enemies must do so not because of the anticipated payoff, not because it always works out, but because it is the right thing to do. It is what God calls us to. Look, I make you no guarantees that the enemy you choose to forgive and serve will ever respond to you in kind. It's possible that the radical change in your behavior will lead to a radical change in their behavior, but it's also possible it won't. It may be that nothing you do ever gets through to them, and they continue to ignore the love of Christ to which you witness. Love them anyway. Love them no matter what. Because even if it doesn't change their life, it changes yours. Loving our enemies is necessary for our own survival. It is spiritual freedom in comparison to the law of reciprocity that binds us forever to the wrong that was done to us. Instead of always working to get even, we are now free to move on and to get past it. As you love your enemies through your actions before your Lord, you will find that God will increase that love. Sometimes even bring loving emotions too. But with or without them, you will be becoming the person that Jesus intends you to be as a disciple. A person who sees your enemies the way God sees you. Someone who's not perfect, someone who's made mistakes and has caused harm, but someone he still wants to love and care for, to provide for, to give himself for. Jesus is out to heal this world full of brokenness and enmity, and he didn't wait for us to stop fighting with him. He took the first step. What would happen if we took the next? In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.